Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rudenberg and Christina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Good morning, Laurinda.
Good morning.
That sounded like, I felt like that sounded like I was in some kind of creepy, like, sex shop. Good morning. Sorry. Okay, Kind Karma Co. It is such a great pleasure to introduce Laurinda to you all. Kind Karma Company employs at-risk and homeless youth in Toronto to handcraft quality jewelry. In addition to fair hourly wages, proceeds from all sales are returned to youth artisans to support their individual goals. I love that so much. I love that you have the word individual goals as well, rather than like a random blanket thing. Kind Karma aims to break the cycle of poverty by enabling vulnerable members of our future generation to reach their full potential so they can continue to pay kindness forward. Can we just talk for a second about how every single human being should be Laurinda? The world would be the best place ever. So welcome. What a wonderful, wonderful thing that you do and that you founded.
Thank you so much for having
me here.
Thank you. Thank you. And for the kind words, it means so much.
So I want to dig in a little bit. Kind Karma has an incredible why. And I know for you that comes from an authentic history. So that's actually comes out of your own history. But for all of the people who are kind of in business and marketing and who own their own companies, the why is just so important. And I think a lot of people have a really hard time digging in and figuring out their why. For you, it was probably different because it really was born from your own experience. So can we go back a little bit, talk about what that experience was, and then how you ended up founding the company?
Absolutely. I remember when I was in my third year of university, I suffered severe clinical depression, anxiety. I went to school abroad. So I went to school in the States when I was actually from Toronto. And I, tried to make it work, but I was away from family, away from support system. I had to come home and I tried to recover. But, with mental health, there's never really a timeline for recovery. There's no set recovery path. It's not like any other disease where you're like, you take these pills, you do this treatment and you get better. It's so individualized. So it took me a long time. And as much as I tried to go back to school, I found I couldn't. And up to that point, school had been everything. I mean, my parents always said, this is your one thing. You go to school, you get good grades, you graduate with a degree, you get that job, and then you work, and that was it. So when I didn't have that, it was really hard for me to find purpose and meaning in my life. I didn't know what to do. So I tried to just skip that part and go right to the employment part. I'll find a job and I'll find purpose there. But I mean, without a degree and without any employment experience, because I hadn't worked up until then, my parents were really adamant that I just focused on school. I didn't have very many options. So I was only basically qualified to work in either retail or service in a restaurant, and simply just for convenience and for time. I didn't want to work up till 2 a.m. at a restaurant. So I chose to go the retail route. And I just look back at those years, and it was probably some of the most challenging years of my life, because you're in a store, you're helping customers, you're interacting with the public. You always have to be a certain person, which is the happy, helpful, kind, and everybody has bad days, but in that environment with long hours, 10 hours, most days, it's just really hard to maintain that facade sometimes. And I found it was difficult for me. So I could never hold a job very long. I somehow would end up just getting sick, and, my mental health was not getting any better. If anything, it probably made it worse. And those years really spawned this idea of giving back to a population who might have trouble keeping and finding meaningful employment. Look at all of the youth that are on the streets or in vulnerable situations. They don't put themselves there. A lot of them are born into families that might not have the healthiest dynamic. And so they're dealing with a lot of emotional and mental trauma as well. And yet, what if that's their only option as well, is to go into retail or restaurant? And so I wanted to create kind of a different model that would help them, you know, find employment that they found meaningful and help them keep it so that they could, you know, be successful and not feel like there was something wrong with them, which is essentially what I felt.
Yeah.
So you're talking about people feeling like there's something wrong with them when they're dealing with mental health challenges. I just want to dig into that a little bit as well, because I think there's a lot of stigmas around mental health, and especially in corporate world. So what are some of those stigmas that you find people who are facing mental health challenges are having to work with? And yeah, how does that kind of set them back?
I think that that's such a huge topic that has shaped my life. I remember my first job, it was retail job. I had been working 10-hour shifts and I had a bad day. I think I had just talked to somebody from university, and then that triggered a lot of thoughts of, you know, just sadness and regret that I couldn't be there. And so when I went to my shift, I was already feeling sad and I couldn't hold it together. So I ended up going to the stock room, excused myself off the floor, and I cried in the stock room. And somebody found me, a manager, and I was fired. And I was fired because I was crying in the stock room. And I had opened up and told them, you know, I'm struggling with this mental health issue right now. And that's why, and I'm just having a bad day. And they let me go. And I was within my probation period. So I hadn't lasted the full 3 months. I think I was 1 week left. And up until then, they had told me I was an outstanding associate. I was doing amazing. And because of that one incident, they let me go. And from then on, I just felt like I couldn't talk about it. And I feel like every time I did talk about it, there were ramifications. And so I never want a youth that I work with to feel the same way, because it's such a huge burden on top of having to recover from that. You're trying to hide the secret that's kind of life consuming. I mean, if you have cancer, you can't go and hide it from your employer and not tell them about it, because it's something that you're working through. And so mental health should kind of be the same thing, where if it's something you're going through and it's impacting your life and your health, that's something that you should be able to share with your workplace and the people who are supposed to be helping you find success.
I think firstly, I'm so sorry that happened. It's incredibly unfortunate, and just a true reflection of how emotionally stunted a lot of us are, and a lot of society has been brought up to be, whether it's a personal fault or not. But just to go to our audience and say, you know, I know I've had certain situations where that emotion that you've just described has come up for various reasons. I know Raquel has probably gone through very similar things. I think most of us have. One of the things that I think is really important to highlight is that you're now impacted doubly, because you're impacted by the fact that you got to a point where you felt like the only thing you could do is cry and release, and that's not a bad thing. And then you're shamed for it. And even worse, you're let go for it. What did that employer say? What was their reason? How did they do that?
Yeah, I tried to talk to them afterwards, and I tried to explain. And what was more ironic was it was a yoga company. So they were promoting health and wellness and meant, you know, being mentally healthy. And I tried to explain that to them. I tried to tell them that, but they said, you know, we don't actually even have to give you a reason. You're still within probation and we can let you go for any reason whatsoever. So that's that. And it really makes me, and maybe it was the time where back then we didn't have these conversations, and it's not even back then like 1970s, but I mean, it's a testament to how people never talked about this. And I remember my dad telling me every single day, because I think he went through something similar when, you know, he was working, where he had depression and he hid it for so many years and wouldn't let anyone know. So he would always tell me, don't say anything. You can't let anyone find out. This is not something you talk to people about. And so it was wrapped in this shame, essentially, where it was something that you had to hide. And it doesn't make you feel any better about yourself or about the situation when you feel like there's something wrong with you. And this is something that you can't let anyone find out.
I think that's I think that's very indicative of our culture as well, because I mean, I remember being raised with the exact same mentality. I didn't have the struggle with mental health, but everybody has their things that are going on in life. And there's no way I would have told an employer about anything or talked about it at work. It was very much taught to be segregated. Like, this is what happens in life, and you can talk to your friends and your life people about that, and this is your work, and there's only work things. These are the two buckets, and that's it. And then my last employer was really amazing, and she was very open and wanted to know about what was going on in your life, and was really engaging and great that way. And I remember it threw me off. It was like it took me a bit to kind of get even get okay with opening up. Like, I really had to build the trust there and make sure, start with little things and make sure you weren't going to have any ramifications for it. So I can definitely see how that happens. So when we talk about companies, I think the other thing is mental health has become more and more of a bigger topic over the last number of years. Like, I want to say probably the last 8 years, it really started actually being brought up and talked about in companies. But like we see with any change, these ideas and mentalities, people might be talking about it. They might want to make changes to create a safer space, but not actually know how. And if they haven't experienced mental health challenges, they may have no idea what they really need to provide as an organization. And for you, you've really been on both sides. You've been an employee, and now you own and run your business. So do you have any tips for people who have organizations or who even work in organizations and want to create a better culture for that?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to how you were saying that it's very segregated. Sometimes in growing up, it's like that. But I think the companies that we find I've even remembered the most, like having the best experience with, are ones where it wasn't kind of segregated, where you get to develop those relationships with the people you work with. And, one of my managers ends up being one of my really good friends, and that's what I take away. And so I think it's important that we don't segregate them, because we want people to succeed in their roles. And I think if you're running an organization and want to create a healthy mental health space, I think just even letting people talk to you and knowing that you will listen and provide whatever support you can, whether it's giving them a list of resources or giving them some time off to go through what they're going through and not having to face ramifications, I guess, for that. I think that goes a long way. People who are going through their own individual things just want to know that somebody understands. And so it doesn't have to be anything huge or flashy, just even showing them that you understand, showing them that you're there for them, and letting them, take time if they need it. That goes such a long way, instead of, piling on stress and deadlines and things on top of somebody who's going through hard times. And I think we've been lucky in one way with everything that's going on in the world. And the craziness is that it's kind of lowered these boundaries that we've put around work and life. I think it has lowered these boundaries around work and life, where you're starting to see people with their kids running around the background on Zoom calls. And it's just, people have lives outside of work. And I think it's good to create this kind of universe where it's all one, and we don't have to keep them separate, so that people can live lives more balanced and therefore healthier.
And I think that's an amazing answer. And what would you say to employers who maybe are worried that letting people off is going to set a precedent? I think that like more old school mentality, you have the management who says, well, if I give this person time off, then that person's going to want time off, and that's over their vacation time. So what do I do now? So people who worry about, yeah, kind of that mentality, what would you say to them?
I think that people who live and work in a healthy environment, they're not ones if they're happy. I don't think people are likely to take as much advantage as we think they are. If you show them the trust and you show them that you're supportive, people will naturally want to be engaged. They will want to see your company succeed, and they will want to work their hardest. So I actually think it has the reverse effect, where if you show somebody that you are human, you are compassionate, you are understanding, it creates that kind of relationship where your employee is somebody who doesn't see themselves as working for you, as somebody's working with you, and you're all kind of on one team. Whereas I think prior to all this, we had this kind of mentality where the more we worked, the more we were worthy, and people would almost pride themselves in working, 70, 80-hour weeks. And they're like, look how hard I'm working. I'm just stressing myself out and working myself to the bone. And that's not something we should take pride in. We should take kind of pride in, doing a good job and maintaining that balance in our life. And so I think it's a bit of both, where you give people time off and naturally they'll want to work harder and better.
I think I want to just jump in there for a second, because one of the things that I want to highlight is in that question, Raquel, what I find really interesting about how Laurinda's set up and describes what Kind Karma Company does. That introduction that I gave everybody at the start is on the website, and it's in the bones and the blood of what you do. And it starts from there. And I think that's a really, really huge point when it comes to how can a company adjust their corporate structure. You have to understand that that needs to be a part of who you are and why you are. And that's the whole social responsibility piece. And social responsibility is not just about, looking after your employees, but it's about giving back to the community. So when we talk about this, I think, Laurinda, you clearly made a lot of very conscious choices about how to, foster that productive and that purposeful career, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And I think that is a really difficult piece for a lot of traditionally authoritative, top-down corporate structures to subscribe to. So having a framework and understanding that, it's more about articulating and really distilling that why, that I think is a really beautiful kind of uprising right now. And it's been bubbling for a little while. I mean, Raquel and I both are pretty nerdy when it comes to like business and organizations and structures, but I found it really interesting as, people raised as women have started to come into more leadership roles. You've got a lot more of that balance of emotional as well as, traditional business, if we want to call it that. And then with the onset of, like you say, the coronavirus has caused us to really have a unified front when it comes to what's affected our collective mental health, and therefore how well we need to be able to take care of ourselves and each other.
Absolutely. And I think all of this started from even when I first started working with youth. At first, I just wanted to tackle kind of the employment piece. And that's what it came out. I wanted to just give them meaningful employment and work and something that would help them be financially independent. But you have to realize, and maybe it was working with this demographic that, has its own challenges, that I realized you can't just tackle one piece of the puzzle because it's all connected. So if I can give them meaningful employment and pay them hourly wages, but if they're not healthy kind of outside of that, they're not going to show up to work. And this is a demographic where they will have no qualms about not showing up, and they will just leave and not say anything. So it was very important for me to find, kind of that 360-degree approach where I make sure that they're maintaining a healthy lifestyle outside of work so that they can come to work. And maybe that was my aha moment. And I realized that. And so it's become a part, more so, I guess, a part of Kind Karma.
Right. And I just want to ask actually and dig into that for a second. When you say you took this 360 lifestyle approach, let's say our audience is just about to start their own company. There's a big social responsibility piece to what they do. How did you said this is a light bulb moment and you had to, and you obviously keep learning. What are your things that are triggering your moments of learning of, okay, I've got to shift? And then what did you do to shift? Can you give us like an example?
Yeah. So even with our proceeds, a lot of people ask like what percentage of proceeds go back to our youth. And we don't work in percentages. So how it actually works is I check in with our youth. And when they first start, all of our youth artisans complete kind of a questionnaire, an onboarding questionnaire, where we ask them, what are 3 goals you want to achieve? What's something you want to do more of? What's something you want to do less of? What are your challenges? And based on all of their answers, we come up with little things that they could do to create a healthier lifestyle outside of work. So say one of our youth says they want to be healthier. So we'll create a little activity like, did you go for a walk 3 times this week? Or did you do some yoga? Or did you cook 1 meal a week instead of eating out all the time? And then they get points for all of those little habits that they're developing. And these points kind of accumulate into, it's sort of like a loyalty program. And then you accumulate all these points, and then the points translate to a certain dollar amount in proceeds that gets paid directly to their goal, whatever it is that they decide they want to do.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's kind of how our proceeds work.
How did you come up with that?
Yeah, it just came up. I was lucky. I talked to some people and we came up with this idea together. And I think it came from that idea that I'm helping with just the employment piece, but what are they doing outside of, if they're going out and, drinking with their friends all the time, how does that help them get to work? Or if they're not feeling well because they're not eating properly or they're not exercising, how does that impact how they come up to work? And so all of that, came together. And I was like, well, how can I help them outside of work? And how can I motivate them to do these little things? And it kind of came about that way.
I love that so much. This is honestly like, I'm working on a model. You and I can talk afterwards. Career pathways in the creative industries. So we'll definitely have a conversation about this, because in the CEO of the school that I used to work for was a recording and engineering school, and they gamified the system as well, whereby you would get points for attendance, you would get points for your assignments, you would get points for volunteering, and then you would buy studio time in the school studios with those points. And it was a little ecosystem and a little economy. And what I love about what you just said is, this to me is the future of work. Work, not employment. Work, not necessarily, not even necessarily a career, because we can often shift careers, right? But it's the way that we could work. And if what it also allows is space for you to individualize your motivation, because up until the kind of 80s, 90s, you've got all these, like we've probably all read all the books on all organizational structures and organizational behavior and HR best practices, or maybe it's just me because my dad is an HR director. But what's shifting beautifully is that we're starting to realize that people need to attach their own value to those wellness pieces. And therefore, if they see that that's a valuable piece, they're then sustainably invested in it, rather than you saying, if you don't, it's punitive otherwise. If you don't turn up to work to do what I want you to do, then you're not going to get money. And it's just 2 very binary pieces. Whereas what you're doing is saying, what are the things that you want to do? From those things that you want to do, we're going to create an individualized point system, which I love so much. Thank you for existing in the world.
Thank you so much. And it's true. I find that it's true when you create that environment, and we have unlimited time off. So I tell them, if you ever need to take a day off or anything, no questions asked, just let me know. Just don't not show up, but let me know, the day before. And they actually find they want to show up because it makes them feel better. So even if they're having a bad day, our youth will come into work because they're like, coming to work makes me feel better. And so it's exactly.
Safe. But that's just it. It's a
Exactly.
safe trust model. So you can't, this is only going to work for companies who truly embody this mentality. This is not going to work for a company that's just trying to put on the best,
It's not the yoga company, is it?
No, it's not.
How many times have you been told by a company, the hours are whatever you want to make them, and then they're like, but actually, we want you here for
the hours is any time, as long as it's between 9 and 5. They're anytime you like.
Yeah.
Yes. And here's a pod where you can nap so that you could stay after 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Anytime.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Have you watched the movie Office Space?
Yes. I love that movie.
Me too.
It's one of my favorites.
Mine too.
I encourage you to all watch that film afterwards, and we'll leave a little link.
Yes, it's such a great movie.
And get some relativity. And then go see if you can work for Kind Karma Co instead. Oh.
Yes.
Well, I think honestly that brings me to the topic of creating that structure of giving, right? That we touched on earlier, because you're talking about how you're transforming a company, from the inside out. You're emanating those values, and when you were in conceiving this idea, what you've done is you've created a way for the youth to have an incentivized kind of fulfillment-based career, art therapy almost, right? For them to create these beautiful pieces, which, by the way, if you haven't looked on the website at this point and you're listening in an audiobook and you're not driving or doing something dangerous, take a look at these pieces that all of these people at Kind Karma Co have made. They're just stunning. You've done that. They're supported in their goals for funding, for education, for housing, courses. Where did the idea for you to create this very particular corporate structure come from? Like, where did that, and it's a loaded question because I know there's a lot of pieces, but I want you to see it from a perspective of how, when you were creating it as an entrepreneur, if you were speaking to a whole, group of other just about to take their first step entrepreneurs, how did you cobble together, this is my vision, this is my corporate vision, and this is what I'm going to create to make a sustainable living for myself as well? Because that's the big thing that we've touched on, all of this generosity, all of this giving, but you've also got to live a good life. Otherwise you're not, well, I mean, you don't have to. I'm not telling you what to do.
It helps.
I would like it helps sustain yourself. So when someone's starting, how did you create something and go, okay, what do I need? That I think is a really important question.
Yeah, so it literally was cobbled together piece by piece. I think I started it out with, what do I want to do? What do I love? And I remember I've always been a creative person, and I went to university for music, and my parents hated it because that's not very practical. But when I came back, I ended up, in retail. And then I actually somehow managed to find my way into corporate. And I worked as an executive assistant for many years. And I miss that creativity. I think I never had that chance between spreadsheets and things. I was excited basically when I got to do a PowerPoint presentation, because that was the only time I could really be creative. So I knew I wanted to do something creative. And growing up, I had always kind of made jewelry as a hobby, and it was something that I loved. It was therapeutic. Me and my mom would watch movies, and she would be sewing, fixing everyone's clothes. And then I would just be making necklaces for myself and other people. So that was something that I wanted to bring back. I missed that creativity. And so I thought, if I can make jewelry as a youth, who's to say other people couldn't? It's not rocket science. It's just, you practice, you learn the skills, and then you just practice, and it's something that you can do. So I started with that portion. I was like, oh, and everybody loves jewelry. I love jewelry. And so I started with, I wanted to create a jewelry company. And it's funny because originally my idea was to create kind of this ethical jewelry company. And I was going to work with some, miners in some foreign land that secretly I just wanted to visit every year and have an excuse to go to. But, it's not feasible for somebody. I know I reached out to a couple people and they're like, who are you? And so I thought about who I could help in my neighborhood. Who is it that needs help? And those years when I was struggling working in retail restaurant, those really spoke to me. And so I thought about at-risk and vulnerable youth here in just in my city of Toronto and how I could help them. And so that piece came and I was like, what if I employed them to make the jewelry, and maybe they would love it just as much as I did when I was young. And it would also be therapeutic for them and any kind of trauma or challenges or emotional issues that they're kind of going through. And so that came together. And then later on, as I worked with them and learned more, I don't come from social work. So it was challenging at first because I didn't have as much experience as probably I thought I would understand going into this, and just knowing that, youth would up and leave and they would just disappear and some would not show up. And then that's kind of when the other piece came in with, creating that extra point system. And that also fosters loyalty because it was like the last piece of the puzzle. So that's kind of how it all came together and was cobbled together.
So tell me, I have two questions on that. One, did the executive assistant role help you create transferable skills? You talk about spreadsheets, you talk about PowerPoint. Did that role, you said you were there for a few years, did it help you to create transferable skills that you then put into building your own company up?
Absolutely. And I think I was lucky in that being an executive assistant, I was kind of all over the corporation because the president or CEO would have insight into every single department. So that meant I had insight into every single department. So from marketing to sales to distribution to operations, I was lucky enough to be able to see all of that and see what worked and what didn't work on a very kind of surface level sometimes. But it really did help in terms of how everything was structured and how I see things from in setting up my own business.
Okay, so question 2 then, and this is I'm going to ask you an uncomfortable question. How did you come up with this money? Like, did you have to save a bunch of money? How did you build a group of people who subscribe to that corporate structure that you built? How does someone go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this and I like jewelry, and you obviously had to build this. How did you do that?
So I built it on my own to save money. And I think that's where a lot of people have, even when I talk to youth, it's really funny that we all think that we need to have this huge, massive, amount of money to be pocketed. And then it costs so much money to start a business. But I think nowadays they've created all of these platforms and all of these tools where you can start a business with not very much. And I think for me, I went into a bit of debt. It probably cost me about $5,000-$10,000 to be perfectly honest, to start everything. And by the first batch, I created just a couple of designs, and then I paid for a trade show where I launched the business. And so I thought that would be a good right off the bat initiation. And I was really lucky that I think the idea was something that resonated with people, because we sold out of our pieces like on the first day of the trade show. We sold out of earrings and stuff, and it was really exciting. And then from there, you just have to keep reinvesting. And sometimes it means you don't pay yourself for a little bit, but you believe in this idea and you kind of cut back on spending and all of that stuff, or you go into a lot of debt and then hopefully pay it off later, which is also not a very good idea. But I think it's that why that really has to drive you. And going back to that, it's so important, because I think I've had so many business ideas over my life. I think I was born almost to be an entrepreneur, because I think even working in corporate, I'd have a different business idea every week and people thought I was insane. And none of them actually stuck until I was like, oh, you know what? I think my personal why is that I want to create a better place. I want to create a better world in some way. And so this really helped stick this idea, because I could see that I was doing something good and making a difference. And so even through all of that, where, I'm cutting back, I'm working 16 hours a day sometimes during Christmas, and, all these insane schedules, it's worth something because I can see that difference, and that's my why. And so that's something that I think is so important when you're starting a business.
I'm just like in awe of.
Yes, that wasn't luck. That was skills and expertise and hard work.
Thank you so much.
And I guess, so, I mean, and that really takes me quite, I mean, we talked about the designs, we talked about how beautiful they were, and that why that you just talked about. It's really interesting that, you've got that why so set, and then you have these gorgeous, gorgeous designs. And there are so many companies that seem to trade one thing for the other. It's like that. It's like in hospitality, where if you have the best location for a restaurant, then your food can be a pile of shit.
Exactly.
And so, when it comes to that, like, who designs all of these looks? Where does the inspiration come from? How do you peddle those two things so well? How do you do all the things you do so well? Just, yeah, answer that question.
I don't know how I do all these things. Sometimes, to be honest, you just kind of stumble through. But all the designs, I actually design them myself, and I design them with just the idea that I wanted people to support what we were doing, but I also understand that there's only so many things that people will buy that they don't like to support a cause. I mean, we've all gone and bought something just because we're like, okay, I want to support this, but that doesn't foster necessarily that loyalty. And so I wanted it to be something that people loved, and jewelry is such a personal thing that I wanted it to be something that people would wear and love. And so that's kind of the idea and the inspiration behind my designs. And it also was something that I just like what I like. And I was like, well, I like it, so I'm just going to put it out there, and hopefully somebody else will like the same thing. Because I was like, if I can't even wear my own pieces, then I'm not going to be a very good promoter of Kind Karma. So I think that's a lot of it too. And I thought a part of my design process too, was that I wanted to create these simple pieces and people could put together their own combinations. So I remember with our first collection, it was just a collection of different necklaces with different layers. And then you could put stuff together on your own. You could wear one, you could wear 5, whichever you kind of wanted. So it had more flexibility in that sense as well. And then I kind of hoped that would somehow stick with somebody.
And it did. I have a couple of quick fire business questions for you. How many employees do you have? How long are their terms when you have someone that comes in at this stage?
Yeah. So right now we had 3, and we just hired 3 more. So we're really excited. 3 more youth artisans. We have 6 youth artisans in total, and they don't actually have terms. So they're here for as long as they want to be. And we kind of help them with whatever. I love to promote actually from within. So I want them to know that they can come in as a jewelry artisan, but ultimately I would love to see, the VP of marketing, if we ever get to that point, be somebody who started out just as a youth artisan, and help them develop those skills so that they can progress through the company and hopefully find their calling and have a spot for them when they grow. So one of our youth artisans started out as that. Now she's the manager of our youth. And yeah, so it's been exciting to see that progress.
And how many pieces do you think how many pieces do you make? Where are you stocked at the moment? Or is it just fully online? How does that work?
We are mostly online. We used to do a lot of, shows, and I guess when stores were open, we had more retail presence. Now we're mostly online, and even the partners that we work with, they do run more online marketplaces and markets. So yeah, I would say mostly online nowadays.
Great. And what's your review process? Process? I don't know where I live anymore.
Tomato, tomato.
What's your review protocol when it comes to these employees? So do you kind of have a 3-month review? Do you you said you give them an intake form to start with. Do you do monthly check-ins? How does that work?
Yeah, we actually do weekly to bi-weekly check-ins, depending on how often we have time for it. Mm-hmm. But every 1 to 2 weeks, we'll do a check-in and we'll go through their list of activities. And it's just because things change so fast in their lives. I mean, emotions and situations can change so quickly with them that I feel like it's important, but they're always welcome to come chat with me at any time about anything that comes up, whether they're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or happy and fulfilled, anything that they feel they want to discuss, they know that they can always text me, call me, pull me aside and chat with me. And so that creates that relationship. And then I would like to do 1-year reviews. Have to still get on a couple of those and just even get feedback from them about how they find working at Kind Karma is. So yeah.
And tell me your favorite success story. Like, give us a moment that just, it just warmed your heart from top to bottom with one of these experiences.
Well, I think that it was one day when I was going to work and it was payday. And so one of our youth came in and she was showing me this video that somebody had shot about a homeless person in Toronto. And she showed it to me. We watched it together. And then we just were working. And halfway through work, she asked me where she could buy cheap food that was not McDonald's. I'm sorry. I think I have a delivery pickup. Can I just run in?
Yeah, sure. Christy and Bosco, you're just going to have to edit this bit. YouTubers, hello. Welcome to the Uncut version.
I'm used to it being me.
Normally your dog's Raquel. It's normally Raquel's dog.
So embarrassing.
No, not at all. It's usually my dogs.
Yeah. I think, what was the last time that happened? I think one of Xena was like snoring. Like in the loudest possible, like human snoring.
That's so loud.
Too. This dog's so loud. Her bark is just insane. Oh, she drives me.
Oh my god, that's okay. Not at all. It's totally good.
No problem. This is behind the curtain.
Exactly. So yeah, we were working and one of our youth asked us where she could buy cheap food that wasn't McDonald's. And I couldn't imagine. I was just like, maybe you could make some sandwiches, or I think Subway has $5 footlongs. I'm not sure, but I was like, why are you asking? And she said that she wanted to take her paycheck and go out and buy food and clothes for the homeless. And that story, I just couldn't believe it, that already, I had always wanted to see kindness paid forward. And I thought it was something that I would wait, years and years. They'd be successful adults and then somehow they would, do something, start a charity or something. And I was not prepared to see it happen so quickly, where this youth who didn't have much, didn't, she probably had less than most of us have. And she wanted to donate the little that she had to going and buying something and buying things for people who were even less fortunate. And she ended up doing that. She went to, I think, a thrift store and bought, sweaters and pants and blankets. And then she ended up buying McDonald's, but she went and delivered it all to homeless people on the streets and walked around the streets of Toronto and just gave it back and paid it forward. And that's a story that to this day I will never forget. And every time our youth do things like that, I mean, one of our youth just signed up to be a stem cell donor, and everybody was, aghast that she would do this. I know her boyfriend was like, why would you do this? It's so dangerous to go under, anesthesia. And she was like, but people aren't donating right now. So I want to give, if I'm a match to somebody to help them, I want to donate, and give back. And so every time I see them, that they just have this innate sense of generosity. And so it's such a privilege to be able to work with them every single day.
That got me a bit teary.
Every time, yes.
It's just so incredible what people will do when they're modeled it. When you give people a choice to be a good person and not an expectation for them to be a good person, but you show them what being good looks like that's incredible. And I love that you said you weren't waiting for it, and because sometimes that's the struggle. I find that I have that struggle where I'm like, I want to do this for you, but you're gonna have to do something back. And as I say it, I'm like, that's so transactional. I'm subscribing to the same model that I don't like. And that generosity mentality really, you don't get to choose. We have to relinquish control on how that iterates.
I think it's so remarkable too, because especially for teens around that age who are dealing with issues at home or wherever their issues are coming from, a lot of times they're looking for a sense of control and of their life, but you don't have a lot of control as a teen. You're not an adult, you're not a kid, you're kind of in the middle. You're looking for the sense of control, and especially if your life is feeling out of control. And a lot of times I think that's when people go into bad avenues, right? They start going down paths that are self-destructive. But what you're doing by modeling this generosity and by showing what they can really do with their lives, they're able to take control still, but in a really positive way. So it's helping, doing these things are helping them as much as it's helping the people that they're doing this for. So that's just remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's also, somebody said that it's probably more empowering for them to do that in a way, because they've probably been on the receiving end of so much charity in their life, that it's so empowering for them to be able to give back and to be the ones who are charitable. So I think it's great that way. And so now we do, well, before everything shut down, we had actually had volunteer days where they were paid, a day's wage, but instead of working, we would all go out and volunteer together. And whether it was we would serve meals at a respite center or we would create care packages and give them to homeless, I think that in a sense too is very empowering for them to be able to give back in that way.
Oh, well, my heart's full, and yes, my old shriveled, dusty heart is now back.
With 3 sizes.
Yeah. You grinched me. Damn.
Not at all. No, I'm sure you're amazing.
No, I'm 100% now going to revisit all of my life choices, and Raquel and I are gonna pivot. In all seriousness, I know we're reaching the end of our time, Laurinda, but I just want to say thank you. And there are a couple of just really key things that we went through that I loved so much that I want to highlight again. I love that you worked for a yoga company, and that was not what we all thought it was going to be. When, you've spent a lot of time having, committing to hearing people and committing to seeing people for who they are, and then providing a structure that so many corporations can follow if they choose to really believe in their why and they choose to act upon that. And I think that you coming from the knowledge of the executive assistant to knowing that that feeling of mental unwellness for the time that you did, that, that's all become part of your superpower. And understanding that, and then starting a business with nothing and just starting small with a very focused product and a focused why was what kept you sustaining in this realm, right? So now having these beautiful designs, these wonderful employees who get, you know, your full attention, full access to you, you've created your safety and your boundaries, it seems, throughout, and learned continuously. And you found ways to pay it forward and then have them pay it forward in their own way, in their own time, which just debunks so much of what currently exists in corporate structure. And I think you're setting us a really good path to understand that it's possible to change. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for doing what you love so that other people can elevate.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for highlighting, you know, businesses like mine, and, you know, making the world a better place by just promoting businesses that are trying to make a difference in the world. So you guys are doing an amazing thing as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe, and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.